Hey guys, thanks for coming in today. Sorry that this is our last time to get together this summer, but hopefully won't be the last time overall, and that you're able to apply some of the things that we've been learning over this seminar series. I'm going to go over strength and conditioning and mobility, which is a big subject, and try to break it into a few pieces. We're going to do a general warm-up that I think will facilitate any of the goals: strength, flexibility, or your conditioning. So the first piece is called a recharge. And after that, we'll get into the specific subsets, more specifically mobility, more specifically strength, and then more specifically conditioning. So this is the recharge. And if you want to join me or follow along later by standing tall, trying to make yourself a little longer from ribs to pelvis, a little longer from the ribs to this head. I'm going to go up and down through the neck. Most of the movements I'm doing 5 to 10 times or more. And you can find this recharge on some of our previous classes on YouTube. I'm trying to fill the movement with breath. Everything works a little better when we're paying attention to breathing. Inhaling on the way up, exhaling on the way down. You can move real slow at first, and that helps make connections internally that you'll get feedback. Feedback's important. We want a stimulus-rich environment with our movement. Certainly you can go faster as it feels good to do so. And I would recommend it that you start to move a little more at sports speed. So depending if you're a Taolu athlete, Tai Chi athlete, traditional martial artist, Sanda, you can make it specific to your task at hand, right? So slow at first, but maybe I want to speed it up to sports speed if I'm planning to do some faster action, or I can keep it nice and slow if I plan to do strength work, for example, or mobility work where I can take more time. So I went up and down, I went side to side, and now I'm going more circular. And there's lots of ways to express circular movement. There's different systems that have different opinions on this. I'm making a bit of a figure eight, maybe turning that figure eight on its side. And happy to answer questions about what systems that I might recommend or where I'm drawing some of this from. We'll go into the hands and roll the knuckles and the wrists. This is like a fan of the hands. So I'm opening up my knuckles and then making a fist and return and going back and forth 10 or so times. It's going to be a joint by joint warm up. We'll try to get all the major joints in the body. Some of the movements will be a little more isolated and some will be a little more integrated. So I move up into my elbow. For sure, I'm doing a little bit through my shoulders and a little bit through my wrist as well. So the wrist and shoulders involved, but the elbow is the focal point. We'll take those circles in both directions 5 or 10 times at about temple's height. And then after I go both directions, I'm going to internally rotate my shoulder and make the circle same but different, making 5 and 10 circles in each direction, kind of brushing by the ribs. You can see already I'm getting a little more sports speed. That might be applicable for you as well. Let's make some big circles through the shoulders next. Arm circles, 5 and 10 times forward. Trying to feed breath with the movement. It won't always be possible to breathe in a precise, exact way. As movements become faster or become more complicated, let's just not hold the breath, yeah? Stay with your shoulders. We'll give them a little twist. The more often you do the movement, the more important it becomes to make it same but different, to play a little bit, because your nervous system will tend to check out when you do exactly the same thing in the same way. Think about like when you walk into a room at first, you might notice the ticking clock. Within a few minutes, your brain has kind of blocked out the ticking clock. So same true for some of our warm-ups. We were doing arm circles a second ago. Maybe you do arm circles all the time, and so they're boring for your nervous system. You can start to add complexity forward and backward same time. You can add speed, like we said, or volume. You can game it a little bit, like mirror a partner, try to move the way that they move. These are ways to make it a little more stimulus rich. Shoulders, and now I'm going to head into the chest and the mid-spine, T-spine, shoulder blades, extending and then flexing, inhaling and exhaling. We can go front to back. We can get a little, like a subluxation kind of move, a side to side. A little bit isolated, and then I'm going to get more integrated. Circle through the ribs, kind of like a hula hoop for the ribs. You could also block some of the motion. So here I'm grabbing my own shoulders. We might do this later in some positions. Binding the pattern, tucking your chin so that it becomes more isolated. The shoulders and neck aren't doing as much when I make a circle this way through my mid-spine. And then you could come back and reintegrate things. So like lateral flexion, I've got my shoulders and neck back in the game. I'm using the arms for leverage and more feedback. And I'm going to head for a twist next. Go in the same direction a few times. If both directions feel good, I'll start to go back and forth. Introducing another concept here, elasticity. So enough to slowly warm up the joints and like really control the motion, like you might see in like a FRC, functional range conditioning. But in martial arts, we also want to use some of our elasticity to coil the energy and release it. This is more like rotational movement training, RMT. So yeah, a lot of letters, right? Don't sweat the letters. We're going to move into our lower back just a little bit, extending for 2, 3, and 4 seconds to the lower back, and flexing lumbar, pelvis, and hip, your quad area. Front to back, side to side. Corner to corner. If we do have a moderator today, I'd appreciate it if you let me know every 15 minutes or so where we're at. I'll try to keep track as well, so I don't get too much. I could go on for hours and hours on some of these subjects.
Okay, no problem.
Circling the hips. Oh, cool. Circle through your lumbar, pelvis, and hip. And then let's isolate the motion of the hip. I'm taking some weight off of this foot so that I can turn inward and outward. So a lot of these things, they'll come up later when we're more focused on mobility. Right now, you don't need to be the judge of your movement. I know we just had a good judging seminar before this, but you just can be the observer right now. Like, okay, that didn't feel great. Maybe I'll do a little slower, not try so much, or this feels really good. I'm going to go faster and do a little more of it. Just be the observer. You don't need to be the judge right this minute. Let's move down, skip the knee for just a moment, and we'll go to the ankles. From after your hip, I want you to plantar flex and dorsiflex your ankle 5 and 10 times, both directions. I'll try to bring it up later. It's a big deal. The mobility of your foot will influence the whole sheath of tissue, the whole highway of your leg up into your pelvis and into your lumbar spine as well. So it is a big deal to be really mobile through the feet. And it's sometimes an underlooked and a missed piece of the puzzle. I'm thinking specifically of like the splits. For some people, the reason they can't get to their splits is really because of their foot and ankle, even though they're blasting away at their hip mobility all the time. So we'll check in with the feet. We'll get a little baseline. We'll assess. We'll observe front to back, inside and out, everting and inverting the foot, stretching the toes out even, making some circles. In some of our other classes, we talked about loaded versus unloaded mobility. So if I take the weight off the foot, it's a little more unloaded, open chain. I can load the foot and stretch in a different way. And they've got to kind of find what's right for you at the right time. So we've been head to toe through the major joints. In the recharge, there's a lot more we could do. There's some longer versions I've shown you in some previous classes. We're going to head down to the floor. I'm going to change my camera angle just a little. And moderator, let me know if that's no good for you guys. I'm trying to get the floor for us. So I'm going to lay to the floor, and this position is going to be our crocodile breathing position. So if you can imagine yourself being a crocodile on the ground, we are moving from the recharging movements of the joints, lubricating the joints, and now trying to reset a little bit the patterns of movement. So sometimes what's limiting the body is mechanical shortness of tissue. It's just short, it needs to get longer. A lot of the time, it's patterning. We're moving the wrong muscle at the wrong time, or the right muscle at the wrong time, but we're not able to lengthen for neurological reasons. It's not that the tissue is mechanically short, it's just we're not communicating what we actually want the body to do. So the recharge, it's useful for almost any goal, And now this resetting might help a patterning or kind of unlocking faulty movement pattern. I'm taking 10 deep breaths with my belly on the floor, trying to be as comfortable as I can, trying to lengthen the inhale so that it takes 4 to 6 seconds, maybe a little more, pausing at the end of the inhale, and then exhaling for 6 to 8 seconds, maybe more. The crocodile part is like you're floating up over the water as you inhale, bubbling up above it, and then exhale, you're sinking back into the water. I'm going to take 5 more breaths this way. And if we're breathing at 4 to 6 seconds in, and we're pausing a little bit and feeling the internal pressure, inner abdominal pressure, and we're exhaling at 6 to 8 seconds and pausing a little bit, that means your 5 breaths could take a full minute or more. Continue to hold crocodile breath. I'm going to throw in one additional little monkey wrench here. It's a useful thing to do, especially for our Wushu athletes, is to stretch the hip flexors and quads. I'm making a grab for the back of the leg and trying to visualize or feel my heel pull to the buttocks and try to get terminal knee flexion, full knee flexion, without overarching the back or hyperextending through the spine. You might hold that for a little bit or alternate back and forth. Our Wushu athletes, Sanda athletes, Taohu athletes, almost universally very strong, but sometimes also very tight through the quadriceps and hip flexors. So I'm going to move into the next piece from the crocodile breath in the reset. We're going to move into a periscope. Periscope is a bit like it sounds. You're going to lift your head out of that imaginary water again, but just the head. Like a periscope popping up over the water, I'm going to try to lift the weight of the head. And then I'm going to start to add some pieces. I'll do each piece about 3 to 5 times. Lifting the weight of the head, and then the head and the jaw. So this way I'm getting to see a little more of the room. I'm tying into some of the ocular reflexes, cervical reflexes up, and then not just up, but up, and I'm going to look to the right. I'm going to look to the left, see a little more of the room, and then come back down and rotate on the way down as well. Don't chase pain, chase feedback. Try to get more feedback, make it a stimulus-rich movement. But if it's painful, let's leave it out. Right, left, and down. As you go for the bigger ask in your body, as you try to get more mobility, your body will look for help. It'll facilitate. So now you might feel yourself extending more through your mid-back. And you might feel yourself tempted to pinch back those shoulder blades, use your strong rhomboids, and even get the arms floating off the floor like a skydiver. And then I'm moving energy down to the lower back, and some of the erector muscles are going off a little further. The glutes could fire. And eventually you're going to max out your extension and move into the next shape. So we started crocodile, then we went into periscope, and now we're in cobra. In my cobra shape, I'm using the arms, the shoulders to help support my position, shaking loose any excess tension, taking some deep breaths. From periscope, I'm going to try to create a little more stability in the body by pulling elbows towards front thighs. You're going to see this again when we do some planking exercise, this idea of pulling into the earth. You're probably not going to move the whole earth, so it's a good thing to pull against. You can express your strength against the floor. Nobody's going to get hurt. So I'm trying to now take away one of the table legs. Literally, I'm reaching one arm forward. There's one less table leg to support the body, and I'm building up some more strength, really, strength and endurance in some of the postural muscles. So when it comes to mobilization, that you want to be more, what most people would ask for, more flexible for your sport, it can be a bit of a complex question because you may actually need more strength in your body to facilitate the mobility that you want. Or as the questions usually pose, they want to be more flexible. You may be flexible enough, but not strong enough to express it, to show it when your body's in motion, or you're in a stance, a single leg balancing or something like that. So it's what you need when you need is the trick. And this is to get more mobility, through the upper body, opening up the hips, and that is your cobra position. From cobra, I'm going to progress into a crawling series. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go into crawling series, and crawling has got two expressions. We got 6 points crawling, where I got my hands and my knees and my feet on the floor, and then also an expression where the knees are floating. And they'll feel a little different, and you'll see what's appropriate for you. We're going to be rocking back and forth just a little bit to help find what feels like the middle. So I'm going to rock forward and put a little more stress into the wrists. I'm going to rock back. It puts a little more stress into the hips, knees, and ankles. And I'm trying not to change very much the shape of the spine when I rock back and forth. I'm going to try to look slightly forward and not straight down to the fingertips. Keep the neck long, the jaw relaxed. When I find what feels like the middle, we can start to express, again, mobility. I'm going to extend through one hip and see if I can extend my hip without hyperextending through the back. I'm going to alternate legs, and I'll do that about 3 times per side. There's no magic numbers, but 3 or more, that could be a good place to start to get feedback. Now, I'm going to start to extend through opposite arm and opposite leg to challenge a little bit the stability. I'm taking one arm off the floor and touching the opposite side shoulder. And I'm doing the very same hip extension. Still trying to keep the spine very still. Still trying to keep the eyes slightly ahead and not straight down at the fingertips. There's a few more nice movements we can work through in the crawling archetype, so I'm going to show you that. I'm going to rock some of the weight back, so I'm no longer relying quite so heavily on the wrists or the upper body, and that's going to make it easier to take all the weight off of one arm and rotate through the mid-spine, shoulders, and neck. My hands are coming back kind of like a salute, not a martial arts salute though, knuckle to brow. Or maybe you could imagine like you're going to slide your hair back and twist slowly. I'll do about 3 per side. Now, if I return to the crawling archetype, 6 points crawling, we can combine the hip extension with the torso twist. And this would be a common demand in martial arts, to be extended through your hips and trying to rotate, right? I'm thinking about jump rotations in Tao Lu or a lot of the kicking techniques of Sanda. We need this kind of mobility. And in this expression, it's both mobility and stability. If I wanted to challenge more the strength of this shape, then I could go into the 4 points crawling from 6 points crawling. So essentially, I'm going to shift weight off of the knees. And it's not a little more difficult, but probably a lot more difficult to express that. Opposite arm, opposite leg, torso rotation. Try about 3 per side. What's nice here is there's not a high risk if you do fail, and that's important for getting results. You want to be able to fail safely. If you don't feel like the movement is safe, you're already working at a big disadvantage as far as being successful in a movement. So finding a good coach or finding a good environment that you could feel safe, but it's also challenging, stimulus rich. We're going to go a little further with 4 points crawling into what's a more common archetype for a lot of bodies. It looks like yoga. I'm going to go to 4 points crawling, but I'm going to have my hips deeply flexed and have a little bit of inversion. So the head's below the heart, biceps in line with the ears. The knees can be quite bent. The stance can be quite wide. You can start to play with that to start to stretch pretty globally the body. There's a lot of things, a lot of demands in this shape. And we can go back and forth, what I'm going to call the yogi pump, from an flexed position of my hips and then pulling through a planked, straight arm plank position into extended hips, flex to extended, and back and forth. I'll try that about 3 to 5 times. Trying to fill it with breath. In some of our other classes, we showed some variations on how to get from A to B using this archetype. Today, we're going to move into the next archetype. So what plays nice after that yogi pump is one of our favorites. I use that term favorite a little bit loosely. It's a tactical frog. Tactical frog is coming out of a kind of a kneeling archetype, or it's in the middle of crawling to kneeling. And that's how we're going to use it. We're going to use it in the middle of crawling to kneeling. So this shape looks a little bit like you might see a child's pose in yoga, but a wide angle version. Dancers will use versions of froggy. I like to get a little confirmation before we go into it. If you're following along at home, you could raise your hand. I swear not to cry during the tactical frog. All right, because this one doesn't always feel good. We're going to try to minimize and avoid pain, but it can be intense. I have my feet turned outward from each other, and this stance would help a lot if you needed more mobility for squatting. Later, we'll get into our strength portion. We'll talk about squatting and single leg squatting. It could also help a lot if you were chasing the splits. This would be a useful archetype. So first, I have my legs, my knees splayed as wide as they can go comfortably. My arms are shoulder distance apart. My shoulders are over my wrists. I'm rocking front to back like we did in the crawling archetype, trying to see if there's any more space. If I can wiggle my knees a little further apart, I'll do that. If I can make it more comfortable, listen to your body and we'll do that. Front to back, side to side, and even corner to corner. Try to express all those angles like we did in some of our standing warm-up. Next step on the tactical frog, I'm going to take the arms down, the elbows bent. My shoulders are stacked right over my wrists now. Back up just a hair. From this shape, I'm going to be careful that I don't hyperextend through the lower back. I visualize as if there was a candle flame under my lower belly. And if I get the belly any lower, I'm going to get burned. So don't spill your ribs to the floor. Don't overarch through the lumbar spine. Try to keep things neutral as you rock back and forth, side to side, corner to corner. There's no magic numbers, but you could try doing, again, like we've done before, like 3 to 5 per side, makes 10 or more repetitions total. We're going to start to add some pieces. And this is where you want to make sure you promise not to cry first, yeah? We're going to do internal hip rotation from this deficit position. From this particular position, it's a little more demanding to try to get the internal rotation of the hip than it might have been, say, from standing earlier. I'm going to try it 3 times per side, and then I'll start to alternate back and forth between sides until I can get 5 to 10 in total. I'm trying to keep the rest of the body still. For some, it would be very easy, for example, just to hyperextend, drop their belly into the floor, and then express some rotation. We're going to try not to do that. We're going to try to keep the spine more neutrally aligned, try not minimize any weight shifting, and again, alternating back and forth, keeping the abs braced tight, like there's a little candle flame under the abdomen. We don't want to drop the ribs lower. I want to go a little further in this one because I feel it's useful specifically for Wushu. I'm going to go both arms to straight, and I'm also going to push one leg to straight. Now, we're not going to do this if it hurts the knee. If we're chasing pain, let's leave it out. Otherwise, you can rock as we did earlier, front to back, side to side, make small circular motion. So it's resembling like maybe a hurdler stretch. As I walk my hands back and put more load into the stretch, might resemble like a hurdler stretch you see in track and field. Might look a little bit like some of our Wushu stances we see in some of the traditional arts, or even like a pubu maybe, right? If I roll up through my ankle. Take your time, work through the both sides. And I want to add one more element, some rotation of the torso. We did some nice external rotation. This is going to be the opposite. I'm going to bend the elbows again, taking my right arm and pushing under to twist. I still got a pretty significant amount of feedback in my legs, inner legs, hips, knees, groin. And now I'm adding some for the upper body. Trying to rock front to back, side to side. Pull into the earth a little bit. We talked about loading the stretch, loading it with a little energy. it'd be super fun, when this COVID situation is a little better, to teach you some partner drills, how you can use your partners to load a stretch. You don't need necessarily special tools or fancy weights and bands. You can do some great stuff with partners. So I'm adding a twist and then now a compound. This is a way to add, kind of like adding weight to a lift. I'm going to add a little bit of weight to this stretch. I'm going back to the extended leg, combining it with the torso twist. Trying to flex the hips, rotate the spine, make sure you can still breathe. Most of these variations, when I'm not moving, when there's no repetitions to count, right? I mentioned 3 to 5 reps, 5 to 10 reps. When there's nothing to count, let's try to last like 3 to 5 breaths, 3 to 5 of those slow articulated breaths. That could give you a good baseline, and you might decide to hold longer or less depending on what you find. I'm going to go to the other side, extending the one leg, giving a little rock, and then the reach. So we've been through the recharging of the joints, 5 to 10 minutes standing. We've been through some of the reset positions, the crocodile, the periscope, the cobra, and crawling. What we've not gone through as part of the resets is a kneeling series, and we will. We took a little detour to get to the tactical frog and the yogi pump, which are some good, I would call them flexible steel movements. They are both strength and mobility movements. You will build strength in something like the tactical frog and the yogi pump. We're going to move into a tall seated archetype next. In my tall seated archetype, it's a good chance to check in again with the feet. So let's get those feet going, plantar flex, dorsiflex, a little reset after the frog. Can wipe the tears away now. We won't have to do the frog again today. Back and forth, plantar flex and dorsiflex, evert and invert. These are things we did from standing, which was loaded, at least more so than we are now on the floor, supported by the earth. Front to back, inside and out, and circles as well. You also, as much as you're comfortable, can grab your own foot and manipulate that, kind of load the stretch a little bit. I especially like to slide the fingers through the toes and spread out and separate that. They've got fancy things you can buy to help spread the toes, but you can do a bit of that yourself as well. And I'll work that through the both sides. Now, tall seated archetype is where we're headed. And a lot of modalities will call this like a shin box or 90-90 hip flexor stretch. One of the problems in fitness is we've got too many names for every which thing. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's less helpful. But we'll call this maybe a shin box today. We're operating from the tall seated archetype. My both hands are behind my back to start. My knees are bent roughly 90 degrees, and I'm rotating internally and externally the hips. I'm going to do that 5 to 10 times. Sport speed, sure, or very slow articulated motion. I think they both have their place. This is fun to do, again, like mirroring a partner, gaming it, because it's if you're not engaged, if your brain's checking out, it's really not going to do you a great deal of good just to do more and more reps. Let's take the arm, one arm free, and rotate a little more through our spine. So I've got this 90-90 seated position, sitting tall seated archetype. And now I'll try to go back and forth without using the hands to suspend the body's weight. That starts to make this a little more of a strength exercise. If I had some weight to hold, a sandbag, you could hold your Wushu implement, your weapon overhead, a staff. There's lots of ways to make this very challenging, but let's make it accessible first. Sometimes, especially in martial arts, we go straight to very challenging and we forget about just making it accessible, make it feel good. Let's rotate to one side or the other. And since we did in the froggy already, some intense internal rotation, you could do so here as well, but I'm gonna do some external rotation. I'm gonna get onto the balls of the feet, and like a drawbridge, I'm going to externally rotate the hip, lift it up and away. You might do that 5 to 10 times. Work through both sides. So it might not look like the splits on paper, but the reason I might want to spend a lot of time in the shin box series is it can really help lead to the splits. You start to extend the legs, back, shin box, rotate, extend the legs. You can tease your way into split variations. It's a good way to use it, one leg or both. If you had some yogi blocks on either side, some stacked books you could use, we could suspend the body's weight and we could play into some other useful patterns. We can, with the same shin box, add one more spicy element, hip extension or hip flexion. And I'm going to add first flexion. What I tell my students is like seeking the earth. I did the twist. One hip's externally rotated, one's internally rotated. I'm going to reach forward. You got a strong side where some of your body's weight will be in your arm, and then the long side and strong side. I'll show it back and forth a few times. You might decide to hang out longer on one side or the other. Rotate. Strong side's going to bear some weight. That elbow bends. Long side, I'm going to creep out. And it's hip flexion first. So I don't immediately round the neck or round the back. I'm folding. It may feel good, especially to hold this longer and more passively, to actually flex your spine, like just really relax. But let's try to see what we can get without doing too much spinal flexion. And remember that you can combine some of the concepts. So if I extended my leg and reached out, right, it might look like yoga's pigeon pose or things that you already know how to do from other modalities. Or extend the both legs and reach. Yeah, you can make it very intense quickly. Now that's seeking the earth, that's spinal flexion. I'm going to also seek some extension. Just lost the lights for a second here, but I think you can still see. This would be that 90-90 rotation, but instead of folding forward, I'm going to extend the hips. This gets me to the tall kneeling archetype. And that's where we're headed next. Rotate and extend through the hips. Yeah, there they go.
Peter, just we're at 3:30.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We're doing good on time. There'll be some time for questions if I can keep this pace. And hopefully you get to review this stuff later if you feel like the pace is a little too quick. We are in the shin box series, and we're building up to kneeling options. So you can use your hand if kneeling is uncomfortable. You're trying to rehab a knee maybe. I talked about having like yoga blocks or stacked books. You could be putting your hand onto that and extending that way. You got a strong side that bears a little more weight and a long side like before, same as when we were on the ground. I'll demonstrate facing you the rotation, extension. Maybe I need some support there. Tall kneeling plays nice with low kneeling. I want to revisit low kneeling here next. So a good reason to do the low kneeling is to mobilize the feet. In some countries, this is just called sitting down for dinner, right? Satsen. So it is a big deal, especially if you've got some high mileage knees or high mileage ankles. I'm going from my tall kneeling to my low kneeling, and it's a loaded stretch for me because of some ACL replacement and other knee stuff. That's not an easy position for me. It might not be easy for you to get into. If you can tolerate it, then rolling your weight from side to side helps mobilize the hips. You can see I got one side a little more mobile than the other. There's a tight side there for sure. But again, you could use those yoga blocks to support you. You can take breaks by coming back into extension and then revisiting the flexion. Now I had the feet plantar flex. I'm going to go the other way and stretch out my toes and still try to tolerate it. Martial artists know what it is to chursu, to eat bitter. That can be confused sometimes with just chasing pain. Don't chase pain. But let's see if we can endure a little bit of discomfort sometimes to get the gains, the benefits we want. So I'm using that same kneeling position. It's low kneeling, but I changed the foot position, right? And it could be a useful assessment even to get back up through your squat, some of our other archetypes later. Right now, I think we used that in another class too. We used our kneeling and our frog shape to make combinations. to find good squat mechanics. I don't want to leave the kneeling series quite yet because we've done low kneeling, tall kneeling, and then we can split kneel. That's what we're going to do next. I like a lot Yin Yoga's expression of this movement. They call it dragon's pose, like you're a Chinese dragon riding on the wind, and the legs are your kind of your body here. So in half kneeling, I'm going to anchor my pelvis. It'll feel for some bodies like tucking under or rooting down. Squeeze your butt and try to extend your pelvis forward. Your knee, your lead knee will track forward somewhere in the alignment of like that third, fourth toe. Your back foot really could be wherever which way that you want, and there might be reasons why you have a preference. And we could use that like 5-breath benchmark to try to lengthen this space. Ribs to pelvis, your hip flexors are into your quads. And trade sides when you're ready. Half kneeling. A nice way to game these and maybe start to bridge the gap between mobility and then conditioning to game the movements or combine them to create a flow. So I'm going to demonstrate just a little bit of that from my half kneeling position. I'm going to externally rotate my hip, sit down into a low kneeling position or tall seated position. There's a shin box again. And then I can extend the hips and step through. I'm back to half kneeling, gamed it a little bit. I'm going to show you another example. Instead of the external rotation of the bottom leg, I'm going to give you an internal rotation of the top leg. Then lengthening out like pubu, drop stance, pushing through the hip extension. Now I'm on my opposite side, half kneeling shape. So I just gamed it a little bit. Internal rotate the top leg. Push through to get to the other side. And or externally rotate the bottom leg. And you have like kind of a back sweep action here. You can get to tall kneeling from half kneeling. Now I'm tall kneeling or tall seated. Want to go a little bit further. You turn your body, you're in crawling. 4 points crawling. Can pass back through the reset. Now I'm in periscope, crocodile, rotate the body, and we got all kinds of things to play. So we're going to get into strength now a little bit. You can shake loose, take a sip. The 2 movements I recommended as your foundation of strength was a push-up and a squat. Now, every sport has a sport-specific demand, and the best way, to do that is do your sport. The strength that I'm going to give you, these options, I think will help in a universal way. But for sure, there's specific ways to get stronger for your specific event, let alone your specific sport. The demands of a spear, Taolu are not the same as the demands of open hand, not the same as the demands for Sanda. So they're very specific, and your coach can help you with that. These are general ways to practice at home and get stronger for everything. So a squat and a push-up. I would like you to be able to do between 3 and 5 confident repetitions in order that you can build strength. If you cannot do 3 to 5 repetitions confidently in the movement, it might not be the right move for you to do. And you can find a variation on that. And we'll talk about variations in the next 5-10 minutes. There is another class we did where we got into it a little deeper. The one-arm push-up, or one-arm, one-leg push-up is really the ultimate expression there, and the single leg squat. So squatting, I'll demonstrate just 2 legs and what's comfortable, pulling down to the hips, pushing back up, full extend the hips. You need to see where your range is at and what the demands of your event is, that where you need to be able to get to. It's nice to have a little wiggle room. If I need to get here, it's going to be protective in my body to be able to get lower with control. And again, it's just very specific to the demands of your sport, of your event, how exactly you need to be able to squat. We're going to squat in what's kind of a universal, I would call it the third world squat. Just in some parts of the world, this is just sitting, right? And we want to be able to tolerate that. I think as humans, it's a good position to get into. Building off your squat, I'm going to next go into a split squat. I'm going to cut the squat in half, which could make it a little more work. One leg's coming back. I'm going to pull myself down. This knee's still tracking forward. Pressing up. So we could call that a static lunge, but I like split squat better. If you had some external load, a weight vest, a partner sitting on your shoulders, some kettlebells, lots of ways to load this in order that you could make it difficult within 3 to 5 reps. A very simple formula to program your strength training. 5 sets, 5 reps. Lots of rest in between. Too many students I've worked with confuse the strength and the conditioning, and they mash them together right away. Strength likes rest. If you're really focused on your strength, effort hard, 3 to 5 repetitions, confident of your form. It can be super hard, but then you rest. You rest a long time until you're fresh to do the next set. There's not a good reason when you're trying to build strength to also pile on conditioning and do like no rest and set after set after set as fast as you can. So strength first, and that'll help protect you so you can practice longer. You can stay more in the game. Strength first will allow you to be consistent. Consistent will allow you to get to the point where you can work intensely, but not to confuse intensity with strength, with consistency rather. So that was a squat. Let me build then the split squat, splitting the weight with both legs. The next thing I would try to do is a single leg touchdown squat. So now I'm going to take one leg from the floor and I'm going to go through this very similar squat mechanic. My knees tracking forward somewhere with like towards that 4th toe. I'm going to touch down and extend. So like the split squat, but I'm able to get a little deeper range of motion and more fully load one leg. I'd like to be able to do 3 to 5 repetitions to help know that that was the right version for me. I'll demonstrate on the other leg. Give me a different angle for that. Empty the weight off of one leg, brace your core. That bracing of the core, it's a little bit something we covered a bit more in a different class. I'm trying not to deform the shape of my spine in order to get lower through this squat. I'd like the spine mechanic to stay pretty neutral for the squat touchdown. I'm trying to get low as I can comfortably. Maybe you're reaching the floor. We're not relying on the floor or falling into the ground. Again, lots of variations. Happy to talk more variations, but that would be probably specific to your needs, like your history and your sport, your event. But in a universal way, single leg squatting is going to get you stronger. And the single leg squat that I would advise, that I think is worthy to chase, is the pistol squat. The single leg squat variation, we'll see it sometimes even in like Tai Chi. It bulletproofs the legs is what it's good for. Build some core strength. So I'm going to demonstrate 3 to 5 pistol squats. The empty leg now is going to be reaching forward, floating from the ground, brace the abs, return. I'm going to inhale on the way down. Exhale the up. I'm not rushing or bouncing through the effort. I'm not trying to condition by doing dozens of repetition. I'm getting 3 to 5 controlled quality efforts. And then we'll give it the other leg a go as well. Strength likes rest. It would be appropriate to rest between sides. Just because one leg is not as challenged as the other doesn't mean your system, your whole body has not been challenged. So really even a couple more, a minute, 2 minutes rest would be appropriate. I'm going to go a little early because of our time restraints, just to show you the other side, the pistol squat. I mentioned before, I like that neutral spine. It becomes less possible to do it as you max your range in the pistol squat. I'm sure there's people that can, but it becomes a little less possible to keep perfect neutral in this movement. So we do what we can, work with what you are working with. Now, there's harder variations too, in my opinion, but this, for a lot of the athletes, a a lot of the demands of our sport. 5 sets of 5, pistol squat, maybe add some weight to it as that gets stronger pattern for you. I'm thinking of like a cross balancing, dragon lunge, dragon squat, might be even more work, maybe for another time. That's got so much a mobility demand on it that you have to say like, is it worth it if I don't need it for my sport? So when I switch gears, that was the squat. And I think if we still got some time, we're going to do the push-up. Awesome. And trying to work towards the single arm version, or single leg, single arm, even better, of your push-up. So first I want to see a variation of the push-up that allows me to get my 3 to 5 clean repetitions. You can go from the knees if you need to. It's valid. I would rather, I'll show you an example, change the angle that I'm working at than go from the knees, because the knees is just not as full bodied. So let's demonstrate what is kind of a classic style push-up. My hands are about at the nipple line of my chest. I'm lowering down, letting my scapula retract and depress. That's your shoulder blade. It's towards your back pocket. Trying to keep the neck long, neutral. Inhaling down, exhaling up. The way that your shins were mostly vertical in the squat, vertical shins, right? Then your forearms mostly vertical through the push-up. That would be a good target to have. Not to confuse it with conditioning. I'm going slow. I'm not trying to do rep after rep. 5 quality reps and then rest. You can load the push-up, weight vest, partner on your back, etc. But there's other ways to make it more intense. One of the best ones being going to a single arm variation. In that single arm variation, you've got some good options. I'll demonstrate one here. There is so many options under the sun. The trick, maybe with your coach, or I'm happy to help you as well, find the right variation for you. And that you would work that, again, 5 sets of 5, lots of rest in between. Right here, I have a little medicine ball. The medicine ball, I'm going to have a long side and a strong side. The long side is going to stretch out and be supported by the medicine ball. The strong side is going to do essentially the action of the push-up, helping me get a little closer to a 1-arm push-up, a more intense version. So the both legs towards straight. I'm lowering the body down, pressing up with an exhalation. I'd like to be able to get 3 to 5 reps. Ideally there, you would rest, maybe even minutes. You don't have to do nothing when you rest, right? Don't go check your phone. Play a little bit of some basics, right? Do some weapons basics. Visualize your form when you're having a break from strength. Work a light combo. You want to rest, but you can have an active rest. Active rest is great. Don't stress your system out. Do the boogaloo, do a little dance, shake loose. But 2 to 3 minutes, if it's truly the right intensity, if we got the right concoction of intensity in the movement, then 3 to 5 minutes rest would be appropriate, or 2 or 3 minutes rest minimum, really. But you can be active. So here's the other side. 3 to 5, working towards single arm push-up. Okay, and again, if you can't access that, like push-ups are easy, but single arm, I don't know how to even get there, then elevate it. Elevating it would be a great option, like a box, or I'll show you just something simple I have here in the gym space. Bosu ball, great tool to have for a martial artist. It gives me like 8 inches more height, and that's going to reduce the load a little bit. Now, it's also round, so there's some trade-off. There's some things that get a little harder, but the height will make it easier to access the movement for me in a lot of ways. So lowering down. Now I'm able to get...
the last 5 minutes of the session.
Last 5 minutes, cool. So, but I think you're understanding that I can make variations to access the push-up, right? And the good variation is changing your angle. Changing your angle relative to gravity will make it easier. This 8 inches means I don't have to have the medicine ball now. I can access the single arm push-up, or maybe eventually then to like single arm, single leg push-up. All right. So what I didn't get to cover as heavily is what we did last session 2 weeks ago, and that's conditioning. I'm going to run us through like 2-3 minutes conditioning and then questions. Jump rope. I recommend you look up Buddy Lee. I gave you about 9 movements to work with the rope last time that you could do in 30 seconds on, 1 minute off, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 1-to-1 ratio as you get better. And that would be a good way for conditioning the body regardless of sport. Check out Buddy Lee and different rope styles. The conditioning style I'll show you here, it's a quick one we can do together. So you've done your strength work, you've done your mobility work for the day. Now you want to push the conditioning. Do something that's simple enough, you're not going to get hurt. We're going to do what's a little sweeping squat, bhakti squat or recharge squat. And I'm going to do 20. Now it's not about strength anymore. This is a version of the squat that's light enough, that light and happy is what I call it, the killer principle. K-I-L-I-H, keep it light and happy. Can be coming out of your heels, strengthening the feet. 20. And then I'm going to go to that crawling archetype and we're going to do a Hindi push-up. I'm going to bend at the elbows, the wrists, come through, sit back, hips up. We did this last 2 sessions. You can find it broken down a little more on the YouTube or look up the Great Gamma protocol. My friend Pavel Mavic has a great variation, a great way to teach this. And let's say I'm going to do 10 of those. And then for the hips and shoulders, crawling archetype, knees float, rotate, extend the hips, pull through your torso, combining a lot of the things we did before and assuming that these things now are pretty accessible to you, you can use them for conditioning. So I'm getting some mobility, some strength, but now the emphasis has become conditioning instead of strength or mobility. I know we covered a lot of different things. I hope it's not too much. Please look back on the YouTube and see where we covered in more details some of the individual subjects. It's a big, confusing picture sometimes. What am I trying to do in fitness? Fitness doesn't really mean anything by itself. So joint health, don't get injured. Then you can stay in the game. Get stronger so you can be consistent so you don't get injured again. Work on your mobility in a general way and then also in a specific way to the demands of your sport, and your conditioning too will get very specific to the demands of your sport. Work with your coach, hire professionals. There's a lot of information out there, but you need to tailor it to what you actually want. So that's kind of the hard thing. Hopefully this helps you in a non-denominational way. If you got questions, concerns, Instagram is Rogue Wolf Training. You can find me Rogue Wolf on Instagram. Peter Wolf is the name, and happy to direct you in different directions to help yourself or to work one-on-one. I do accept online students and happy to find a way to help. Wushu brothers and sisters, martial arts is my passion. It's my definition of self. Be a martial artist. Thank you. We got Brandon Sugiyama coming up next.
Peter, if someone asked about a knee warm-up.
A knee warm-up. Yeah, so the knee is poorly vascularized and doesn't have as much synovial fluid, say, as the hip. So you can warm your knee up by warming up your hip and your ankle. Then, in fact, I think that would be the better way to do it, is to do a bunch of hip stuff that you saw, do a bunch of ankle stuff that you saw from all the positions, and I think your knee will be feeling better because of it. Having said that, let's go knee specific though with just a minute. Flex your hip, Jingji Duli, like Golden Rooster, and flex, extend your knee. Get a little bit side to side and circle, stir the pot. Do each of those things 10 times. Slow at first, faster as it feels good. Extend and flex, extend and flex. Inward, outward, circles. If that's all easy breezy, then level it up. Open your hip wide and do the same. Gets a little tougher. But again, your knee will get a lot of the benefits from the other positions that we went through. Kind of like the elbow. We didn't spend a ton of time on the elbow, but it's helped out because of the shoulder, because of the spine. If you have injuries, that's different thing, right? You need to see a specialist and get out of pain. But you don't need to spend a lot of time necessarily in one specific joint. Get stronger. That'll protect your knees, and warm up those hips and ankles, and that'll help your knees out too. Good question though.
No more questions. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay, well, that was super fun. Hit me up if you've got more specific stuff. Maybe it bubbles up later for you, and continue to enjoy the day. Thank you so much.